Warren, and I'll be taking you through the Financial Reporter. And this is the intermediate session, which means that we assume that you've had a chance to play a little bit with the Financial Reporter before. This isn't your first look at it. So the pace of today's sessions will be a little bit faster than the basic session. What we plan on covering today is looking at the account groups, and we talk a little bit about creating financial statements by dragging an account group to a blank sheet. So we'll take a look at the account groups to show you what that looks like and how you set that up. And once we've done that, we'll take a look at some different types of smart sheets you can do outside of the standard balance sheet and year-to-date income statement type report. Take a look at some different types of reports that you might potentially want to create, and take a look at some of the foundations for creating what we call a call spec format, which means just a different set of formulas that are involved with creating a financial statement. We'll take a look at taking a financial statement and how to quickly add new columns and also rows to a financial statement as easy as possible. It's just sort of a tip and trick as far as what's the easiest way of modifying your financial statement to add new columns or add new rows. We'll take a look at some common formulas outside of just simply reading your accounting data. In today's session, we'll look at how to create a simple net variance and a simple percentage of total formula and some of the pitfalls that you might run into in trying to create these formulas. Very briefly, we'll also insert a couple of the tips involved with inserting a logo into your financial statement. And lastly, we'll take a look at how to verify accounts. So you can have the program automatically check to see that all of the accounts that you require for your report are selected for your statement, and then also making sure that there aren't any duplicated accounts. And also ensuring that if you have multiple sections on a financial statement, such as a balance sheet, that the appropriate accounts are in the appropriate sections. So that's the session that we plan on doing today. Why don't we get right into it? And I'll be demonstrating using Adagio Ledger, version 9.0b. And before we actually begin today's session, I'd just be interested in opening up two polls just to see who we have in our audience today as far as what you currently are using. And so let me just ask the question first of what version of Adagio are you using in order to access the Financial Reporter. I should also mention Adagio Ledger 9.0a. I'll also include 9.0b in that list. That poll probably should be updated. So if you're an Adagio FX user or Adagio Ledger user of version 9 or version 8.1 or earlier. So I'll just wait till a couple more people get a chance to vote. Looks like almost everyone's there. So I'll just close the poll. Thank you very much for voting. So for our audience today, we basically, it's 2/3 Ledger, likely current versions, and 1/3 Adagio FX. So that's wonderful. Thank you. And also just to get a feel for what kind of experience you've had with the Financial Reporter before today's session. Whether you've had some good experience in creating financial statements and you just need to top up in some tips, or whether you've had not much chance to look at it before, or perhaps you just played with it a little bit. So I'll just wait a few moments and give people a chance to vote. So I think that's almost everybody, so that's great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So for people in the audience today, we have a wide range of experiences. Many of you have modified existing sample statements, or many of you have had good experience in creating from scratch, but there's a wide range as well. So that's good to know, so I know how to tailor what we're doing today. So why don't we get into the Financial Reporter? Again, there's two different ways of launching the Financial Reporter. From the Reports menu to do a print-only mode, or from the Maintenance menu to do a full access mode, create as well as print. And so just to remind that in order to create financial statements, you need to launch a Financial Reporter where it sees maintain. So in the basic session, we take a look at a number of the different groups and menu options under the View menu, the different types of account data that you can report on, your chart of accounts and your list of departments if you use those, and also statement groups, so that once you've created your financial statements, you can organize them in such a way that you can send them all to the printer in one print job rather than select and click and select and click. or also export all of your financial statements into a single Excel spreadsheet, a book with different reports on different tabs. In today's session, we'll take a look at the one that we don't focus on so much in the basic session, called the View Account Groups. And quite often what you see in maybe some of our demonstrations, where we talk about dragging and dropping financial statements when you create them, it's from this View Account Groups menu where this occurs. And let me just minimize these so that we start from a simpler screen. In the sample data, we create a few different account groups, and I believe when we convert your Adagio data for the first time, we create a few of these sample account groups for you to use. Essentially what an account group is, and I'll just expand the first one, is a listing of an organization of your chart of accounts. And it could be your complete chart, or it could be just a portion. And essentially the purpose of an account group is to say, I want to group accounts into certain organizations so that these are the rows that appear on a financial statement. And you can have them in certain sections or subsections, whether it's one subsection or two or three, or as much of a tree as you require. In the example of this particular sample data that I'm demonstrating with today, the assets are grouped together in a certain number of subsections. And let me just expand this out just for a moment so we can see the account descriptions. So these are descriptions that you can specify, and we'll show you how to create those in just a moment, but just to highlight examples of how you might create account groups or how they might look like. So here's an example of a list of groupings of accounts within the assets, within the liabilities, income, expenses, and retained earnings. Those are 5 different types of accounts. So this is one potential way that if you wanted to just print a list of your balances or your year-to-date net changes for all of your accounts, then here's an example of an account group and a list of all of your information. You can organize your chart of accounts that looks a little bit like a balance sheet. And this is a very simple one where you just have 2 sections, an assets and your liabilities and shareholders. And within each of these sections for assets and liabilities, there's some groupings of accounts, your current and fixed assets and so forth, and on the liability side, and also all of your P&L accounts all grouped together into one section. So a balance sheet could potentially look as simple as this, or if you need to organize them a lot more complicated in very specific highlights, then you can choose to organize them. So there's all sorts of different sections and subsections for your liabilities and so on and so forth. When you're first getting started creating account groups, it's probably better to create them in a simpler way such as this, because once you create a financial statement using an account group, it's not a static situation. You can always modify the spreadsheet in order to make changes such as I want to add this account or delete that account, or do some formatting changes. So it's probably better to start with something simpler like this, and then you can make changes to it, rather than spend hours trying to create the perfect account group that will make a completed statement when you do the drag. And so it's easier just to do it this way. So you could use a balance sheet type account group that uses all of your chart of accounts, or you could do something that just lists a particular subsection of your chart of accounts. For example, you could have one that looks like an income statement, such that only your income and expense accounts are listed and none of your balance sheet or retained earnings are required. And in the example of this particular account group, you can see that, again, there's 2 sections, and within those there are subsections for your particular types of income and your particular types of expenses. And you can have them as simple as this, or you could have them much more specific as far as the layout of the chart of accounts. How do you go about creating a chart of accounts, and how do you know when you're done? Well, before we actually create one, let me just highlight a couple of the formatting features that are available and just describing what the difference is between a group and a range. What you'll find is that underneath your company name, you'll have your main level groups, and this will be what will end up being the main title at the top of page 1 of your financial statement when you create it. So this will be the title that appears at the top. In the example of an income statement, you may have one or more groups, and so your first level of subsections, you would create something called a group. Now, a group is not a place where you specify accounts. It's just simply a place where you can specify where you have titles and you want to have a subtotal and so on and so forth. So if I right-click on the word and choose Properties, you can see the options that you can assign to a particular group. You can choose to add a page break in front of the group, So if you want to have a new, the income start on a new page or the expenses start on a new page, you can choose that. If you want to have the word income appear as a text, as the subsection title, you can choose to do that. You can choose optionally to have a total of all of your income or your total of all of your expenses or any group that you specify. And of course there's the title itself, and then there's some styles, which are essentially default fonts. You can choose to keep whatever you have here, or you can change to a different heading, or once you've created your financial statement, you can always change the font of your statement after you've created it. So these are just simply defaults. Typically, I wouldn't worry too much about changing the fonts unless you really want to create a new style and set them up here. But it's probably easier just to select the fonts after the form has been created and customized in that way. So a group is created every time you want to do a section or a subsection. When you get to the lowest level, and you're not going to be doing any more subgroupings, in the case of this particular statement, if you don't care about subgrouping revenue into different types of revenue, then this is where instead of creating a group, you would create something called a range. And a range is what's used for defining the account numbers and also some different options. So if we take a look at the revenue grouping, for example, if we right-click and choose Properties, you can see that the screen looks a little bit different. Not only do we add the title, but we also indicate the account range. And right now what we see is that the account range is from 4,000:4999. So that's a very nice, simple range. If you happen to have a revenue range of accounts that aren't quite so pretty and they're kind of scattered a little bit more, there's no reason why you can't go comma 5,500, comma 5,600, colon 5,699. So you can do a number of non-consecutive accounts in this way. So you're not limited to a single range of consecutive accounts. I'll just remove those. For a particular range, you indicate what type of accounts you're dealing with, whether they're balance sheet, income statement, or retained earnings. And I'll come back to the detail in just a moment. You can choose to have a subtotal for all of your range accounts, in this case revenue. And there's a checkbox here that will say revenue if you're dealing with income statement accounts, or it will say liabilities if you're dealing with balance sheet accounts. And the purpose of this checkbox is just simply flip the sign. In the raw data that's stored with your accounting numbers, revenue, income accounts are stored as net credits, and so therefore if you just plunk the raw data on your financial statement, they'd all be negative numbers. And so the purpose of this revenue checkbox is to automatically insert a minus sign in front of all the formulas that involve these types of accounts, so that when you create a financial statement, it will show the amounts as positive on your report. Similarly, for liabilities accounts, you would choose this checkbox in order to indicate that your liabilities will print as positive on your statement if that's what you choose. If you're doing a report where you have a single column and you're not doing separate debits and credits, and you want to have all your assets as pluses and all of your liabilities as minuses, then you may choose, if you wish, just to not worry about checking that box and have them report the numbers raw from the accounting data. So if I take a look at an expense account, Properties, you can see that, of course, this is not a revenue account, as far as an income statement, it's an expense, so therefore you wouldn't check that box. And the last option is the ability of enabling detail. So right now we have a range of accounts for our cost of sales. If you want to have the ability of showing the breakout of those accounts, so perhaps each individual account on separate rows, you may want to turn on the enable detail. If you're not interested in that, you just want to simply show a total cost of sales and you don't care about the individual account amounts, you just want the summary amount, then you can choose to disable the enable detail and you don't need to worry about that at all. If you choose to break out the amounts from our range here, you have two more choices. You can choose to show one row per account, or if your company data supports departments, you can choose to show detail lines, which essentially means break out one row for every individual account and department. And so if you do that, then when you expand a smart sheet, you will get not only one row per account, instead you will get one row per account department pair. So how do you go about creating one of these statements? Well, essentially what you do is when you go to create a new account group, what you do is you right-click on your company name, and you'll create a new group, and this will be sort of the first level. This will be your company name, so maybe so a demo income statement. and it probably don't want to add a page break for your first group because this is the first page. It's the very top of the page 1. You'll probably definitely want to have this name be the title for your financial statement. And depending on the type of report you're doing, you may or may not want to include a total line. In the case of an income statement, you're not summing together all the financials, so you may not require a total line across all of your accounts because you're just subtotaling particular groups, your income and your expenses. So once we create our first group, and you'll notice that the icon looks a little bit different. This icon here specifies the options that you've picked. So it will specify that name is title is selected when you've got a little blue line at the top, and include total line will have that line at the bottom. You can see some of them do and some of them don't. In order to create an income statement, now we could just simply dump out all of our income statement accounts if we want as a range, or we may want to break them into different sections. So if we want to break them into different sections, such as revenue and expenses, we would then create a new group. And that would be, for example, our income group. And similarly, do we want to have income start on a new page? Do we want to have the word income appear? Do we want to have a total of our income, and so forth? So right-click, and that will create a group called income, and we'll do another new group called expenses. And similarly with options as you desire. Now, of course, these options, again, are not static. If you realize you don't want to have the word expenses print, or you want to change it, you can always edit the financial statement that you create. When it comes time to grouping, you might want to have different sublevels of income, the different types of work that you do, and then within that you have further groups. So there's no reason why you couldn't add new groups, and you could have revenue from this department or revenue from that department and so forth. Or you can do different types of work. You can add as many sort of levels as you require. When it comes time to creating the final level, where you're not going to break down any further, you just simply want to start outputting the numbers. At this point, this is where you then choose to do a range. From here, then you would choose the type of range. So you might choose revenue, or you might choose a different title. Your range of accounts, you may happen to know what those account numbers are right away, or you may not know the exact ranges, and you can come back to that later. Just for the purposes of the demo, I'll just leave that range blank for now. I happen to know that I'm doing an income statement. It would be nice to have a total of all of my revenue, and I want to show them as positive when I create my financial statement, so I'll click that checkbox. And I like to have one row for each account, and I want to have all of the departments within the account summarized. So that's kind of the breakout of that. And so what this will do is this will create the revenue. We haven't assigned the numbers yet. So at some point later on, you can go back and print a chart of accounts and go, these are my revenue accounts, and I can go back in and right-click in Properties and type in the range, so if I wanted to. Or perhaps an easier way of doing this is to go to the View Chart of Accounts and bring up that window as well, and take a look at all of my chart of accounts, and I can say, here's my first revenue account, and here's my last revenue account, and I can drag them and drop them on top of the revenue, and it'll automatically create the range for me right here. So you can drag and drop accounts. Let me just do that again, and I'll do it just a certain selection. So if I know that these are my revenue accounts, and I want that one, and I want that one, and I want that one, and that one, you don't have to do a nice selection, and then I can just drag that and drop it. And you can see that it created a non-consecutive list. And if you realize, no, actually I do want that one, and that one, and that one, and that one, you can drag them and drop them later, and it automatically rebuilds the range to make it as efficient as possible. So you can choose to either type them in or use drag and drop in order to specify the range of your accounts. And sometimes it's easier to work from a list that's known as opposed to just kind of guessing. So you can do the same thing. I can right-click, do New Range, and do the same thing for all the other different types of ranges. Or if you happen to have one that's already set up, such as I do here, you do have the opportunity, too, of copying, by right-click and copying a range, and then pasting it into another group. So we can paste here. So it pastes with all the same formatting options as well. The red line that flips the sign indicates that it's a revenue that will flip the sign. The blue line indicates you want to show details, and the black line that shows that you want to do a subtotal. And similarly for expenses, I can right-click and copy and paste. So if you've got one that's already set up and you just want to simply create one that's kind of similar but it's got maybe different account numbers, I can just do a copy and then right-click and do properties and then just edit the account range if required, and so on and so forth. So maybe I'll just do the last two. I'll copy and paste and copy and paste. So essentially what we've done now is we've got an account, group, title, and it's got two groups within, and you can certainly have more than two. You can have as many as you wish. And within each of those groups we have some ranges that indicate the particular account numbers. Now that we've gone to create this account group, how do we use this? Well, as we've seen in the basic session, to create a financial statement from the account group, you left-click and hold down and drag the title over to a blank sheet. Doesn't matter where you drop it. You can drop it in any cell you want. And once you've done that, what you've done is told the financial reporter, these are the accounts that I want to have on my report and organized in this way. So these are the rows and these are the titles, and these are the accounts that I want to show details and some that I don't, and so on and so forth. So we've told the financial reporter what accounts we want. Now we need to tell what rows we want to have, or sorry, what columns we want. Because we're choosing to do an income statement, we probably want to do net changes type fields, such as the net changes for the current month or the net changes for the current year. We may want to show the budgets. So we may want to see our full year budget, or perhaps we may want to see our year-to-date budget, and so on and so forth. So you can select fields as required. Once you've selected all of the columns that you want, and you can always come back and add new ones later if you wish, or copy, and we'll show a little bit later. If you happen to miss one by mistake, that's okay. So what we can do is we can choose to just go ahead and create the financial statement without any of the Smartsheet stuff. If you're new to financial reporting, I'd probably recommend, and even if you're not, to enable the Smartsheet, because it allows the report to have some more dynamic features to it, such as being able to recalculate new accounts as you add them to your chart of accounts. It allows you to refresh your statement on demand and see a visual view of what you're going to do rather than rely on print preview to refresh information. You may choose to add all of the titles, such as not only the name of the demo income statement, but you can also have information such as of November 30th, 2009, that kind of thing automatically gets inserted if you choose Add Titles. And we'll show you some of these other options in just a moment, just to finish up this particular portion. If I just simply click OK, that will go ahead and create our financial statement. Here's actually I'll just leave the account groups so you can see the difference. So you can see Demo Income Statement. There's the title there. Your company name prints at the top. As of December 31st, well, 2007, that just happens to be the fiscal period and year that's selected in our toolbar. You can see the income and expenses, the groups, and the revenue, other income, cost of sales. So these are the ranges themselves. Because we chose to show details, you'll see dot range in column A of the Smartsheet. If we had not chosen to show details, dot range would not appear in column A, and so therefore when you expand, it will remain a summary. If you did choose to show details, then dot range would be inserted, and of course, then in that case, the account range would be created. And the revenue numbers are positive. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little minus sign in front of the GL amount, and then that's what flips the sign. So that's just a very quick indication of how an account group can be used for creating a financial statement, which could be, 90% done. At this point, you can add new columns, add some different formatting, add some other formulas if you wish, add your logo, and so forth. So you can make kind of smaller changes to a financial statement such as this. What are some of the other types of financial statements you could potentially create? Well, let's just create a couple more, and I'm just going to use one of the predefined account groups. Let's just use this income statement, and we'll create a departmental comparative. So if you're a company that uses departments, I can drag over the income statement, and let me just clear all my selections. So let's just do a year-to-date analysis of our departments in this particular company. And you can choose more than one column. Typically, you only choose one or two fields in a departmental comparative. So what you can do is, if you want to have columns side by side that represent your departments, and then your accounts are still represented as rows, what you can do is you can choose this departmental comparative checkbox. And what this will do is this, instead of creating the form right away, it will give you a selection of departments you may choose to select. So you don't have to do all of them. You can say, I just want that one, and that one, a number of non-consecutive departments. If you have created predefined ranges from the View Departments menu, you can choose those, or department masks. You can choose those as well from this form. You can choose to add have a column for all of your departments, whether or not they're selected here below. So this would be like your entire company. Or if you want, you can choose to select just a column that sums just the selected ones. Of departments, and you can edit this text later if you wish, of course. And sometimes people want to be able to say, I want to be able to create a financial statement that shows a sum of my departments, and my departments don't have any patterns. They're not fall into a mask. They're not a nice little range like this. They're a bunch of non-consecutive departments. And so using this process is a way of doing that. Just select your non-consecutive departments, select this sum checkbox, and give it the title that you require, that what does it mean for all of these departments to be selected. And then this is the way that you can create a financial statement that sums your non-consecutive departments. You can choose to click both those checkboxes if you wish to, if you want to have just the sum of the selected departments and sum of all of them if you wish. Sometimes that can be a bit confusing, so usually it's better to pick one or the other. At this point, you can choose to reorganize the sum and the individual departments if you wish. Maybe it's desirable to have the sum at the left, so you can drag those columns around if you wish. And then once you're done, then we've got a financial statement that shows here's our sum and here's our individual departments column by column. So if I preview this, well, you can see we're not quite missing that, so all I need to do is to landscape that so we can get everything to fit on one page, and preview. And so now we have all of our accounts as rows and our departments as columns, including a sum. And there we have a fairly quick financial statement that compares a number of departments column by column. If you want to realize that, oh, I didn't want 200, I wanted a department 150, there's no reason why I can't change that on the fly in this department row, and press the F9 to refresh, and so that will recalculate the column, and the sum will automatically recalculate as well. If you only wanted the sum, you didn't want the individual departments, you just simply wanted the sum, then there's no reason why you couldn't hide or hide when printed all of those columns, so that when you print preview, now you only have the sum of the selected non-consecutive departments rather than all of the departments as well as the sum. And of course you can see that when you have fewer columns, then it gets centered across the page. So here's an example of what we call a departmental comparative. I'll just unselect the hide when printed. One thing I'll briefly mention, I don't want to get into the specifics or the details too much, but if you click on one of the the cells that calculates the number for you, you'll notice that in the formula there's something here called RNG merge, and that stands for range merge. And essentially what the purpose of this formula is to grab your accounts and your departments and generate your account key for you. So what that formula does is it takes a look at cell F8 to tell you what amount to print. F8 here is the Y, or the year-to-date token. It will then find all of the accounts in B12 and all of the departments in F6, and it will merge them all together, and that's how it will generate which accounts it prints this amount for. In this particular cell, it's not terribly interesting because there's just a single department. But this cell is a little bit more interesting because you can see there's 3 departments separated by commas. And so this particular formula is used for summing all 3 of those departments together. Or if we collapse the form, this cell now grabs all this entire range of accounts and those 3 particular departments and sums them all together. So that's just some of the basics in regards to merging together accounts and non-consecutive departments together. Rather than doing this by scratch, the process of what we did about doing a drag and drop from the account groups and choosing the departmental comparative option is, I'd say, the easier and preferred way of getting this type of formula, so you don't have to guess what the syntax is. The program will create it for you. Okay. Another type of financial statement you might want to do is a 12-month financial statement. So let's just go to View Account Groups, and we'll pick the income statement again. And you may choose to do all of your 12 months, months 1 through 12. So these are our actual amounts. So if you want to have January, February, March, April, May, or whatever your fiscal calendar happens to be, you can choose these particular fields. So I can shift-click and click on the words and press the space bar, and that selects all 12 fields simultaneously. You may also want year-to-date as well. So if I choose that, then what you see here is a list of all of my 12 months, and if I happen to do the report, say, as of June, then this particular method of selecting fields will show our first month that we know of, and anything in the future will just simply show blank or 0. And then as we move forward in the fiscal calendar in July, August, September, October, November, December, then the fields fill in. So that's one possible way of creating forms. So let's just insert a sheet. You can also do the same thing not only for the actuals, but you can also do the same thing for budget numbers as well too. So if you just simply want to show a list of your 12 monthly budgets, where are they here? Change in budgets. So you can choose the same thing, your 12 monthly budgets. Press the space bar and say, and your full year budget too, I guess. So here's a quick way of showing your 12 monthly budgets in a very quick financial statement. And you can show it as a range of all of your accounts, or you can expand to show the individual accounts. And you can also select it for an individual department if you wish. Insert worksheet. Another type of a way of showing 12 months is your most recent 12 months as opposed to a static. So here we are, we're in November of 2009. If you want to be able to show your previous 12 months, which also goes back to, I guess, December of 2008, and that spans a fiscal year, there are fields available for that as well too. So let's just view account groups, drag over income statement. And what you'll find is that there's a section here called prior period net change. So you can select the net change for this month, last month, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, all the way up to 12 or 13 months ago. So you can select all of those. And if you want to see a list of your amounts for the sum of the most recent 12 months, then there's a field, where is it? Called PY, running year, and that represents the most recent 12 months, regardless of whether it goes back into your prior fiscal year or not. And so if you pick that, then what you have is a list of, and let me just reorganize these so that they fit a little bit better. So you can multi-select 12 columns and resize one, and that will automatically resize all of the selected columns. And so what we now have is the net change for this period, which happens to be December 2007. If I go back in a prior month, we can see that all of the amounts kind of shift over one column to the left. And so if we go back in time, we can see the amounts are shifting, or if we go forward in time, we can see the amounts are now shifting over to the right. And perhaps it's easier to see the actual dates rather than seeing net change this period and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to insert one row and insert another row. And instead of seeing net change this period, call specs allow you to insert formula the period start. So we can see that the period start is December 1st, 2007. And insert formula, account information, period end. And so there's another form that shows the period end. So what I can do is I can then multi-select those and copying and paste them. And so you can see a different range. So the running year you can see is from January to December, or I'll paste them for all of my other accounts here. And now, if I choose to show a different fiscal period, now you can see that our current month is now November, and you can see that the running year is a different range. Or if I go back in time, you can see now that the dates are shifting. And you can see that the running year and the particular columns are shifting as well. So these date fields are basically the general ledger fiscal period start and the general ledger fiscal period end for the field code that it finds in cell E8. Or if you're not using a call spec, there's no reason why you can't simply put in the actual field code in double quotes. So you can say net, make sure I use the right codes here, net underscore M, double quote. And I don't need the $E sign. So this is an equally valid formula that says, tell me the fiscal period end for the field represented by the net change this period. And so that will work the same way too. If you don't happen to be using call specs, you can use these dates as column headers for any specification. I'll just escape out of it. So here's an example of another type of financial statement that shows 12 columns, and it shows the most recent 12 columns. It doesn't matter what fiscal period you select. It will show the current one. And you can have the current one on the right and have them go back the other direction if you wish. This is just the way that they were selected. So if you want to rearrange them, you can certainly do that as well too. In fact, just very briefly, in order to change the positioning of columns around, it's a lot easier to do this in the financial reporter. All I need to do is to highlight a column, and I can drag it, and you can see that the red line indicates where it's going to get dropped. So I can easily drag columns back around so that instead of doing a copy and paste and paste it to the, insert some blank columns, it's very easy just to simply drag columns around in order to reposition them. And very quickly, I was able to reorganize the columns from from going forward in time to going backwards in time. Okay, so there's another example of a financial statement. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to show you using the demonstration how you can do some modifications to a financial statement, adding new columns, adding new rows, and also changing information using what we call a call spec. So when we created and dragged and dropped, there was a little checkbox that says use call spec. Essentially what that does is it adds a different row here, and you can see that there's some text .call spec. What this does is it reserves this particular row for the field codes that you're going to use for your financial statement, for your columns. And those field codes you can see from the account data. So for example, M happens to be the selected period, Y is the year to date, and so on. So this field is also formatted hide when printed so that you won't actually see the M and the Y and the BS print when you actually preview your financial statement. You can see that that amount doesn't show. Let me just expand it. So if you realize that, oh, I didn't mean to do budget half year, I meant to do the budget full year, then it's not too late. You don't have to recreate the form from scratch. All you need to do is to figure out what code you really wanted to put in there. And so if I go to relative change in budget and I realize, oh, I didn't want the half year, I wanted the full year budget, which the code is BY, then all I need to do is just to simply type in BY, and there we go. It recalculated the title, it recalculated the numbers. So you're not stuck with having to change that. So all you need to do is to re-overtype the information into that cell. In order to add a different column, it's very simple to do so. In the financial reporter, I can highlight a column I want to copy, and I can certainly copy and paste just like you can in Excel. But in the financial reporter, I can also do duplicate column, which means copy it and paste it next door. And so there we go. And so maybe I want to have the last year, year to date. And so here's another column. And if I want to maybe move this over to this side, I can do that. So it's very easy to add new columns to a financial statement. Duplicate column not only copies formulas, but also copies all the formatting as well too. So it's a lot easier to do it this way rather than having to copy and paste or retyping in formulas, because you don't have to redo all the formatting as well. So in order to add new columns, it's very simple. Right-click, duplicate column, and that's what I would recommend that you use if you have you're working on a financial statement, you've got some formatting that you like, and you just want to simply add a new column for some new information, whether it's a data field that's stored in the database, or whether you're doing a calculated column like a variance column or so on. You can do the same thing for rows as well too. So if we, for example, if we expand, and we can see that in our example here we've got some revenue accounts, but we also have some sales returns accounts, and right now they're all kind of lumped together. If you wanted to create a financial statement that shows all of your revenue accounts and your sales accounts broken out individually, but maybe you're not so interested in having the sales returns broken out individually, rather you'd have just one row for all of your sales returns. You can do that quite simply. The easiest way of doing that is by first duplicating the row so that basically does a copy of the row and pastes it below. Then just change your account ranges so that all of your sales accounts are in column B, and those are your sales accounts. And then all of your sales returns, and maybe just change that to 99 in case we happen to add new. We can expand that. You can see our sales returns are now there. And in order to show the sales returns as not a range, but just simply lumped together, I can delete the range from that row and change this text to sales returns. And so now we've got all of our revenue sales accounts and sales returns. When I expand the Smart Sheet, now we have all of our sales accounts and one row for sales returns. And that subtotal probably is incorrect. What I would have to do is change that to not some D11, but D11, comma D12. And then now you'll see that the subtotal is now correct. So that's something that you can do, and then of course I need to copy and paste that across for all the other columns. So, right-click, copy, or Control-C is fine, and Control-V to paste, and so forth. So this is a way that you can show different formatting for your rows, and certainly you can do that by typing in, but it's a lot easier to do it by duplicating the row and then just making minor changes. And that's why it's easier to start with a simpler account group and make minor changes like this, rather than creating your revenue account and having all these different types of ranges and details, and oops, I didn't get it right, I'll right-click and drag it again, and so on. So it's easier to make simple changes like this. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to undo our changes back to where we begin. Financial Reporter has unlimited levels of undo, actually until where you saved it last, and I can see that I've gone to a place where I can't undo it. So let me just delete the row and change that to the right revenue account ranges, F9. So let's add a couple of calculated columns. So these columns are stored data values, and right now we don't have a place to store. I want to see the difference between my year-to-date this year and my last year-to-date. So you'd have to type in a variance column formula. And very similar to Excel, you can do standard calculations. In fact, all the different types of formulas that are available in Excel are also available in the Financial Reporter. And if you're not quite sure what formulas are available or how to use them, if you access the help, all the formulas and different examples of text manipulations or mathematical calculations or so forth, there are examples of all the different formulas in case you're not quite sure how best to use a formula. Let's do a very simple one first. Let's do a variance that calculates the difference between year-to-date this year and year-to-date last year. In order to create a new column, even though it's not a database column, it's a lot easier to right-click and duplicate, because that copies all the formatting. The formula itself, we can overwrite this GL amount formula with just a simple Excel-like formula. Cell E11 minus cell F11 equals E11 minus F11. Enter F9 to refresh. So now we've got the variance for the revenue accounts, and I can expand that, and now it calculates the variance here. Now, of course, we want to change the title. We can just simply overtype the title there, and we don't need that field code anymore. So now we've got the different variances for all of our individual accounts. And then all I need to do is to copy this and to paste it to all of my other account ranges. Pretty simple. So that's a very simple formula because all of the calculations that we're doing are involving cells within the same row. Variance is very simple. Let's do a second one, and this will involve a percentage of total. Now this one's a little bit more complicated because we will be doing calculations involving cells that are in different rows. And this is more complicated because the smart sheet, when you expand, in the case right now the revenue total is in row 12, but if we expand, now the revenue total is now in row 28. And because of the nature of smart sheets and where rows appear, where it appears here may not appear there, and that's certainly not the case in Excel where things are a lot more static. So we need to be a little bit more specific and careful when we create a formula that involves cells that are in different rows than where we're entering in our formula. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to purposely make a couple of mistakes as we go through creating this particular column just so you can see some of the pitfalls. What we're going to do is create a formula that indicates the percentage of total of a particular account against the subsection, so a particular sales amount against the total revenue. And you can do it against the total income if you wish, or if you wanted to, it's just a matter of choosing what total that you pick. And again, the easiest way to do that is by duplicating the column rather than having to copy and paste. And let's do the very simple calculation to begin with. We want to have our individual account divided by the total, so that would be, in this case, E11 divided by E12. So equals E11 divided by E12. And let's format that as a percent. And I'll F9 to refresh that, and I'll format the total as a percent. So far so good. However, when I expand the sheet, that idea of where the row is, now you can see that the amounts are totally wrong because now the cell referencing has been updated, so therefore now we're looking at the wrong row, 31. It's no longer looking at row 28. It's looking at the completely wrong row to figure out the division. So in order to make sure that we do this properly, we have to anchor the position of where the total row is. And just like in Excel, the way to anchor a row position is by putting a $ in front of the information that we want to anchor. So in this case, what we're doing is saying, for this particular cell, we want the row position not to change. So when I expand the form now, after I hit enter to save it, now we can see that those percentages look a whole lot better. You can see that it's now looking at cell E28 for what we're dividing by, and as I move down the list, we can see E28 is staying anchored. But what we're starting with, the numerator, is in fact changing its cell reference. So that's good, okay. Just like we did with the variance column, I can copy this and paste it. But you can guess probably what's going to happen next is, oh, how come that's not 100%? Well, whenever you copy and paste a formula that uses a cell reference and you've got a $, you'll see that it doesn't update, and that's the purpose of the $. So we need to ensure that when we copy and paste that formula, we put in the appropriate cell reference that we require. And do the same thing for the remainder of them. Control V to paste, and we want that to be E21. Control paste, E24. Control paste, E27, and I'm sure some of you probably are seeing, okay, well, you know what's going to happen when I hit enter to save this? I get an error. Well, how come I get an error? Well, what am I dividing by? E27 is 0, and mathematics and formulas don't like being able to divide by 0. And the formula itself doesn't know that the cell E27 is 0 until it does the calculation. So in order to ensure that you don't have the word error, in order that you make sure that you don't have error, then what we need to do is do an if formula in order to say, well, if I'm about to divide by 0, then output something different like 0. Otherwise, go ahead and do the calculation. So just like Excel, you can do the same type of formula. Equals if, and what's the test that you want to do? We want to make sure that $27 is not equal to 0. If that's true, then the true condition, comma, go ahead and do the calculation. Otherwise, comma, what do we want to output if instead of the word error? Let's just output 0, and then close parenthesis. So now we can see that it is now going to simply output 0%. So now I can copy that back into all of my other formulas, making sure that I update the cell reference to the totals. And you'll notice that in the financial reporter, the not equals to, greater than, less than signs got changed into exclamation mark equals, and that's the financial reporter way of showing not equal to. And you notice that I was able to type it in one way and the financial reporter just converted it the other way, or you can type it in this way. It's exactly okay to do it either way. Just control paste. These need to be 21 and 21. Control paste. And these need to be 15. And last one, control paste. And make these 12. So this particular percentage of total formula was a little bit different because of dealing with doing a calculation with a cell that was in a different row, and also because it was a division formula, we have to protect against the possibility that you're dividing by 0. How are we doing for time? Okay. So one thing about the call spec that I didn't mention before is that you can choose to have more than one field selectable from this list. And so right now we have a variance column that calculates year-to-date and this column. What we could choose to do is we can choose to select different fields here. View account data. Maybe I want to have the budget year-to-date also selectable from this location. So I can do is I can drag this field and drop it on top of an existing text, and now what we have is both fields. So I can left click and say I want the year-to-date and select the year-to-date last year and hit the enter key to select that, or I can click on the cell and select a different column, enter, and then it automatically updates, and you can see the variance gets updated as well too. So that's a way of saying, well, if I want more than one possible column and just to see information and different information, I can have lots of different fields that I can select from the list based on the field code. And so that's a call spec feature. So I just want to make sure that I remember to do that. Okay. Very briefly, I wanted to show you how to insert a logo in a financial statement. And what we're going to do is we see that we've got some room over here where we can insert a logo. I'll show you the wrong way to do it, and then I'll show you the right way to do it. The wrong way is just to simply select a single cell where you're going to insert the logo. In order to insert it, you go to the Edit menu and Insert Graphic. And a number of different graphic logos are supportable, and I see I don't happen to have any in this particular database. Let me see if I can pick a different one. I don't have that one there. I knew it had probably removed it by mistake. It's logos. I know there's one. There we go. So here's the wrong way to do it, insert logo. What happens is it resized the column and the row in order to fit the size of the graphic, and that's not the right way to do it. Let me just undo that, Control-Z. The right way to do it is to multi-select two or more cells and right-click and cover the cells or merge the cells together. And what this does is this created the location of where you want the logo to be in the appropriate size. Then when I go to Edit, Insert Graphic, and that graphic wasn't so good. I hope I can find a better one that's a bit different. I guess I must have removed them from the location that I had them from. That's interesting. And you can see that we support all sorts of different graphical files. So there, when we insert the logo, it resized the logo to fit into our merged cells. And so therefore, this is a way that you can have a logo that spans multiple rows or multiple columns, so that you can have the logo the appropriate size that you want, as opposed to having it resize your rows and your columns. So that's just a tip that you need to merge cells together by multi-selecting 2 or more cells, and they can be in rows or they can be in columns, and use the cover cells. And again, edit insert graphic. We do support a number of different interfaces, whether they're bitmaps or JPEGs, or you can see the different supported graphical files. The last thing I want to show before we close the session today is to show you how to do account verification. And we've done all sorts of income statements, so I want to do the last one with the balance sheet. So I'll go to View Account Groups and show you a balance sheet. And let's drag that balance sheet and drop it into the form. And let's just do the simple balance sheet, the balance ending of the selected period. And go. And the first thing that most of you will see that when we create this form is, whoops, our assets don't equal our liabilities. What's wrong? There's a couple of different ways in order to check to make sure which accounts are wrong, whether they're missing or whether they're duplicated and so on. The easiest way is to go to the View menu in Chart of Accounts, and what you can do is we can right-click and say Verify the Report. And then when we expand, we can say, here's a list of all of the accounts that are missing. And so which sections do these accounts belong in? Well, it's just a matter of selecting them and dragging them. Well, these ones are current assets, so we can drag them over and reset that range. Where do these belong? Well, I'll put them in the current assets. I'm not sure if that's a great place. I'm not an accountant. So you can see that the account range is generated, and when I press F9 to refresh, great. Indeed, our account balances match. If we just want to make sure that we haven't missed any 0 accounts, we can right-click on the window here on the left and reset. So it resets all the statuses. And then verify again, and now we can see all the green dots indicate all of those accounts are correct. And all of our income statement accounts and our retaining earnings accounts. Great. Let's just change this account range to 1,500 and F9 to refresh that so we make sure that our balances no longer work. If we reset this and re-verify it, what you can also do is check for duplicated accounts. If you see a blue exclamation mark when you do the verification from the View Chart of Accounts, this indicates that this particular account is duplicated. Now, you can't drag this and drop it into a thing to remove it. Essentially, what you need to do is to look a little bit in your ranges in column B for your smart sheet to indicate, okay, well, where do I see 1,500? It may be at the end of a range where they are here, or maybe they're kind of buried within a range and need to identify which is the right place for account 1,500 and which is the wrong place. And indeed, it's not a current asset, so we can remove it out of here. 1499. Oops. F9 that to refresh, and now our amounts are good. Reset and re-verify, so we're good again. So this is a way that you can quickly but manually identify whether accounts are in the right location. In order to have the program do it for you, you can insert verification into a particular financial statement. What you do with your smart sheet, if you want to do that, is to right-click, and in column A, somewhere above where your dot ranges are, it could be in the report title, or it could be anywhere above your first row where you specify accounts. You right-click and you say Make Verify. So what this says is, everywhere from this row and down, I want to be able to check the existence of accounts. Well, which accounts do I want to check? Well, in column B, I indicate that. For a balance sheet, I would put in all of my accounts from 1 to 9999. If it was an income statement, you might want to put in the range of your income statement accounts, and so on and so forth. In order to check this, and maybe what I'll do is I'll just temporarily remove a few accounts just so that we can make an error occur. in order to check this manually or to have it happen automatically, to do it manually, I can right-click on Verify and choose Verify Range, and I'll get a message saying, well, these are the accounts that we're missing. Or, to have the program do it automatically, well, it's just a matter of printing it or previewing it. So let's just preview the report, and it will give you an error, and it will choose to not work. Or printing, it will give you the same error message, too. So that's the way to automatically have the program check, make sure that accounts are appropriate, is to have .verify and an account range. And so it will check missing accounts, and let's just kind of add this in here. And it will also check for duplicated accounts. And it will be a little bit more helpful if I verify range as far as locating the duplicated cells. It will say that account 1500 is a duplicated account, and it will tell you the second instance of where it was duplicated. So it will tell you one of the cells where you find it, and the other instance will be somewhere above it. So you know cell B14 or one of the account ranges above cell B14. And so it's just a matter of going ahead and making the appropriate changes. So now if I right-click .verify, all the accounts in cell B6 were okay. Now, that's fine to verify accounts being somewhere on the statement, but you wouldn't want to have an asset account in the liability section or a liabilities account in your profit and loss section by mistake. You want to make sure that the appropriate accounts are in the appropriate sections. And so you can do that as well, too. You're allowed to put in multiple .verify sections, and that specifies the groups. So let's say that I want to have all of my asset section accounts indicated above. Then I'll just copy these. And I want to make sure that all of my liabilities and shareholders' equity are in the next section. So I'll just paste that and change the account range here to 2,000 to 39.99. And then paste the P&L accounts, paste, and make sure that the accounts go from 4,000 to 4,999, and so on and so forth. So now what we've got is we've got multiple .verify sections, and if I start up at the top and say right-click Verify Range, it will say check here, everywhere from here down to the next location of a .verify, and it will indicate that all the accounts were okay. And then do you want to continue on to the next section? Okay. Everything from row 22 to row 27, all the existence of the accounts are fine. Okay. And then our third and last verification section are okay too. So this is a way of creating in your financial statement some automatic indications that accounts are missing. And if you were to create new accounts in your chart of accounts in the program, and it doesn't happen to fall within these ranges, so for example, if I create an account 1950 and you did a verification, it will automatically tell you account 1915 is missing. So you have to come in and edit one of your account ranges in column B in order to have the program identify that. In fact, I'll just do that very quickly. So I'll maintain, I'll do a new, oops, actually I can't do that because I'm in the financial reporter. If I were to add to account 1950, it would automatically, this report will automatically say, oops, this is a new account that you've added, isn't in one of your ranges already set up for your account. So it will refuse to print. Instead, it will tell you 1950 is missing. Make sure that you assign it somewhere. So that's just helpful to make sure that your account ranges are set up correctly, and also that when you add new accounts, they don't go missing. So that's all I have planned for today's demonstration of the Intermediate Financial Reporter.